Walking through the City of Reflections. Chapter 1, The Mirror Gate. I don't remember exactly when I found the mirror. It had always been there, leaning quietly against the farthest wall of the attic, tall, dust-covered, with a frame carved in gentle spirals that almost looked like water caught in motion. There was something about it that felt patient, as if it had been waiting for someone to look closely enough. That day, I did. I brushed away the layer of dust with the sleeve of my coat, revealing the surface beneath. But what looked back at me wasn't quite a reflection. It shimmered, subtly, like a pond touched by rain. My face was there, yes, but behind me, there was no attic. No dusty boxes. No slanted wooden beams. Behind me was a city. Its streets were polished silver. Buildings stretched upward like glass towers woven from moonlight. And lights, not lamps or torches, but reflections themselves, floated in the air like drifting fireflies. I reached forward. My hand passed through. There was no resistance. Only a sensation like warm mist, like memory turned liquid. I stepped forward without hesitation, and the attic fell away. The city greeted me with silence. The first thing I noticed was that everything, every building, every tree, even the sky above, looked as if it had been made not of matter, but of mirror. Not hard or sharp, but soft, like breath captured in stillness. The air carried no wind, but somehow it felt like it moved. As if the city itself breathed, slowly, without sound. I looked down and saw my own reflection walking with me, step by step, shimmering beneath my feet. But it wasn't always identical. Sometimes it moved just a little differently. Sometimes it paused, looking up while I looked down. I felt no fear. Just a strange, gentle curiosity. As I wandered forward, I passed arches shaped like eyes, doorways without hinges, fountains that didn't flow but hovered mid-splash, like a drop frozen in time. I passed mirrored birds resting on mirrored branches, each one turning their head to watch me, their gaze calm and endless. There were no people. Only their echoes. I saw silhouettes moving in the distance, transparent, like the light of stars in water. They didn't speak. They didn't seem to notice me. But they danced, quietly, their footsteps leaving gentle ripples in the reflective streets. One figure paused near a corner of a building. I approached slowly, unsure whether it would vanish. It didn't. It stood still, gazing into a pool that mirrored not the sky, but a memory, my memory. A birthday cake, candles flickering, a child's laugh. The figure turned to me, and though it had no face, I felt it smile. I whispered, "Where am I?" It raised one hand and pointed toward the horizon. There, rising tall and serene in the distance, was a tower made entirely of frames, picture frames, mirror frames, all empty yet gleaming with something unseen. I walked. The more I moved, the quieter everything became. Even my footsteps began to fade, as though the city wanted me to listen, not to sound, but to stillness. At one corner, I found a bench shaped like a folded ribbon. I sat. Across from me, a window showed not the street, but a memory of a hallway I hadn't thought of in years. Old wooden floors. A clock that ticked gently but never moved its hands. I rested there for a while, not tired, but calm. Then I heard it, a soft chime. Not from a bell, but from the light itself, as if the reflections were singing to one another. I stood, drawn toward the sound. Each step felt slower, lighter, like time itself was loosening its grip. Eventually, I came upon a mirror not part of the city structure. Freestanding, like the one from the attic. It rippled when I approached. In it, I saw myself, but not quite. This version of me was dressed in silver, eyes glowing faintly with light. The mirrored version raised a hand and placed it flat against the glass. I did the same. The city around me breathed in. And then. Chapter 2, The Garden of Double Suns. When the light faded, I found myself in a garden. But not like any I had known before. The air was a soft lavender hue, and the sky shimmered with two suns, one high above, round and gentle like a drop of honey, and the other just beneath the horizon, elongated and quiet, casting a cool silver glow. They moved in slow, opposite arcs, reflecting against one another in the mirrored surfaces of the trees. Yes, trees made of mirror. Their trunks were long and curved like glass sculptures, and their leaves, oh, their leaves, translucent, delicate, like flattened crystals catching not just light but memories. As I walked beneath their canopy, I saw flashes of laughter, silhouettes of old friends, and the warmth of moments I'd long forgotten. Each step on the garden path echoed with the softness of thought. No sound, just presence. To my left, a pond stretched wide like a silver sheet, perfectly still. But when I peered into it, it did not reflect the garden, it showed the sky I remembered from home. The stars, the moon, even the gentle clouds I'd watched from my bedroom window. It was as if this city didn't mirror the world around it, but the world within. A quiet hum drifted through the trees. I turned. There, resting against the mirrored bark of a leaning tree, was a bench. It looked like it was carved from layers of glass, folding softly into the shape of comfort. I sat, and the glass did not chill me. Instead, it seemed to remember warmth, and gave it back gently. I let my eyes wander. In the distance, the garden spiraled upward into terraced hills, each one shaped like a ripple, each lined with rows of flowering mirror bushes. The flowers bloomed in impossible colors, rose gold, pearlescent blue, warm shadows of green. They swayed, though there was no wind. A mirrored butterfly, translucent and glowing, landed on my shoulder. I didn't flinch. It stayed for a moment, then fluttered off in slow, graceful loops, leaving behind a faint trail of light in the air. I followed. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to see where such a creature might lead. It guided me through narrow paths between tall stalks of mirrored grass. Some of the blades bent as I passed, not from pressure, but seemingly out of courtesy. This place, this garden, felt aware of my presence, not watching me, but walking beside me, step for step. I came upon a clearing where the two suns met in their reflections. Their light touched, and from that meeting point rose a tree unlike the others. Its trunk was wide, and its surface shimmered with moving images, not of memories, but of possibilities. I saw myself painting, then reading under a tree, then walking with someone, though their face was always turned away. The images came and went like breath, soft, slow, unhurried. At the base of the tree was a small pool, no more than a meter across. I knelt beside it and looked in. This time, I didn't see my reflection. I saw a child, me, younger, perhaps 6 years old, sitting beside a lake, skipping stones with quiet joy. A memory I hadn't held in years. The child looked up, and though it could not see me, it smiled. I didn't cry. There was no sadness. Only a deep, quiet knowing. I dipped my fingers into the pool, expecting water. But it wasn't wet. It was soft. Like fog and silk and a whisper all at once. The ripples I caused formed circles that rose from the surface and drifted upward, as if gravity worked differently here. Each ripple became a tiny mirrored orb, and as they floated into the sky, I saw scenes inside them, faces, places, old dreams half remembered. The butterfly returned. It landed on the center of my hand and folded its wings, then unfolded them once more, revealing a pattern that looked like a doorway. I understood. The garden was not a destination. It was a passage. I stood slowly. The butterfly lifted from my hand and flew upward, joining the floating orbs until it was a shimmer among many. I turned, and where the path had once ended, there was now a bridge. Thin as a thought, wide as trust. It stretched toward the hills beyond, into a quiet place where light bent in a curve. The sky shimmered gently there, as if the very fabric of time was exhaling. I walked forward. The mirrored garden behind me hummed once, a farewell without words. And the suns, still circling each other like old companions, bathed my path in gentle warmth. I followed the curve of light into the next chapter of the city, feeling time slow just slightly more with each step. Chapter 3: The Hall of Forgotten Faces. The bridge narrowed behind me as I stepped into a new space. There were no doors. Only a shifting veil of mirrored light that parted like a curtain when I approached, revealing a long corridor. It stretched ahead in a soft arc, impossibly long, with no ceiling, only a pale sky above, and walls made of countless mirrored panels. Each panel was shaped like a portrait frame, yet none held paintings or photographs. Instead, they shimmered with faint images that flickered in and out of focus, faces I didn't recognize, but that still stirred something inside me. Some smiled, some blinked, and some simply looked out into the distance as if waiting. I stepped forward. Each footfall seemed to echo with a memory not quite mine. A schoolyard laugh. The hush of a library. The sound of someone humming a tune I didn't know, yet somehow remembered. The corridor did not feel empty. It felt inhabited by impressions, shadows of moments once lived, now suspended in quiet light. As I walked, I passed alcoves. Each one held a single, suspended face, like a still pool of reflection given shape. One showed a young man with kind eyes, cradling a small, luminous cat in his arms. Another displayed an elderly woman, gazing upward at something I couldn't see, her smile serene and knowing. None of them moved. Yet each seemed alive in stillness, as though caught in the middle of a thought, a dream, or a goodbye. I paused at one alcove where a child's face floated, surrounded by the mirrored impression of a carousel. The child's mouth was open mid-laugh, and around her danced faint glimmers of color, like memories trying to become real again. "Who are you?" I asked softly. The corridor answered, not with words, but with warmth. A pulse through the floor, a shimmer in the mirrored air. It wasn't a place for answers, I realized. It was a place for remembering without remembering why. Farther along, I passed a frame that showed only light. No face, no image. Just a soft glow, as if the memory it once held had gently faded, leaving behind only the feeling of something once loved. I stood in front of it for a long while. I didn't try to remember. I simply let the light wash over me, and something deep in my chest, something quiet, loosened. Not in pain, but in release. Like setting down a story I'd been holding too tightly. As I continued, the mirrored corridor gently curved, revealing a circular chamber at its heart. It was vast, but not grand. Quiet, but not empty. At its center stood a single chair, facing a large mirrored wall. I walked toward it and sat without hesitation. The mirror before me was different, darker, like dusk trapped behind glass. It shimmered, and then it spoke, not in words, but in image. I saw myself, younger again, standing beside a window on a rainy afternoon. The rhythm of raindrops blurred the world outside, but inside, there was a stillness I had not felt in years. A cup of tea rested in my hands. Music played faintly from another room. No one else was there. Just me. And yet, it had been one of the most peaceful afternoons I could remember. The mirror changed. Now I saw a scene from a street I'd once walked. I couldn't name the city, or the year, but I recognized the smell of rain on stone. I saw someone holding a red umbrella. They passed me without a word, but for a moment, our eyes met. I'd forgotten it until now. The mirror shimmered again, and now it held no image, only my reflection. My current self, seated calmly, the chair cradling me like memory made solid. I stood. As I did, the corridor behind me began to dissolve, not disappear, but shift. The faces gently faded into the walls, as if retreating into stillness. The path ahead opened with quiet understanding. There was no need to hurry. Even time, here, was not in a rush. I stepped forward into the next space. It was not a corridor. It was a stairway. Wide. Shallow. Made of the same reflective stone, but glowing faintly from within, like moonlight captured in marble. The stairs curved upward, into a space wrapped in mist. With each step, I felt a little lighter. Not in body, but in thought. As if the more I walked, the more I let go, not of things I wanted to keep, but of things I no longer needed to carry. And when I reached the top, the mist parted. Beyond it was a garden of mirrors, floating in air. And at its heart, a single mirrored bell. Silent, waiting. Chapter 4, The Floating Garden of Bells. The bell did not ring. It simply was, silent and still, floating above a mirrored pedestal at the center of the garden. I stepped forward, and the ground beneath my feet no longer felt like ground at all. It was soft, yielding gently with each step, like walking across clouds woven from reflections. All around me, mirrors hung suspended in the air, some flat like windows, others shaped like petals, or wings, or sails. Each one turned slowly, catching light that didn't seem to come from any sun, but rather from the thoughts drifting through the air. And in every mirror, something moved. Not my reflection, but movements. Moments. Things not entirely real, not entirely imagined. One mirror showed a kite fluttering endlessly in a sky that shimmered with deep orange and soft lavender. Another showed a child and an old man sitting on a porch, sharing a story wordlessly, lips unmoving. A third mirrored only the face of someone sleeping peacefully, their breath slow and calm. None of it was frightening. Everything in the garden breathed with quiet rhythm. The air, the mirrors, the distant sky, they all pulsed together, gently, like the heartbeat of a memory made visible. I looked up. The bell still floated, untouched. It was shaped like a teardrop, but smooth, polished, and perfectly still. It didn't reflect me. Instead, it showed something else, a vast sea under moonlight. Not stormy, not still. Just endless. And then it shimmered, ever so slightly. A tone, barely audible, passed through the air, not like a sound, but like a feeling, soft and deep, resting against the edges of my awareness. I didn't try to reach the bell. Instead, I sat beside the pedestal. The mirrored surface beneath me cooled slightly, then warmed, like a sigh from the earth itself. Around me, the floating mirrors turned slowly, and each one began to hum in quiet harmony. Not a song. Just a presence. It was then I noticed something new. Tiny mirrored bells, smaller than a fingertip, hanging from the edges of the mirrors. Each one shimmered with a different color, not vivid, but subtle, like colors remembered in dreams. When they moved, they didn't chime with metal, but with emotions. One rang with the sound of a gentle farewell. Another with the weight of a story told and understood. And another, the softest of all, sounded like a question that no longer needed an answer. I closed my eyes. Not from tiredness, but because everything I needed to see was already present inside me. The garden, the bells, the mirrors, they didn't need to be watched. They needed to be felt. And I did. I let myself float in thought. I remembered the sound of rain on windows, the smell of old books, the feeling of someone brushing my shoulder in passing, without words, but with care. Then I opened my eyes, and the bell, the one above, had lowered. Not to me, but to the center of the garden, where a platform now shimmered in a spiral of light. It didn't beckon. It simply waited. I walked to it. Not quickly. Slowly. With the same care as one walks through a quiet forest at dawn. And when I reached the center, the bell turned once in the air and tilted forward, then back, so gently it almost seemed accidental. That was enough. A sound, a tone deeper than thought, filled the space. It wasn't loud. It wasn't even sharp. It moved through everything. It moved through me. It rang not to summon, but to settle. The floating mirrors aligned. One by one, they began to drift downward, placing themselves in a wide ring around me. Together, they formed a circle, a memory pool not of the past, but of peace itself. And within each mirror, my reflection appeared. But not as I was now. Each one showed a different feeling of myself. One smiled with curiosity. One closed its eyes in quiet acceptance. Another stood tall, bathed in soft golden light. None were wrong. None were false. They were all true. Parts of me I had forgotten, or simply hadn't visited in a while. The bell rang once more. And every reflection slowly faded, leaving only a single image, me, as I was, seated gently in the garden, surrounded by light. The mirrors rose again, lighter this time. Fainter. Like petals caught in an upward breeze. And the bell returned to its place above the pedestal, still silent. The path forward opened again, not as a road, but as a ripple. A shimmer of invitation, leading outward into a quiet field where the stars did not hang above, but drifted around like slow, thoughtful fireflies. I stepped through the ripple. The garden of bells did not close behind me. It simply remained, soft and still, ringing silently in the air. Chapter 5, The Starfield Library. The ripple parted like silk brushed by wind, and I found myself standing in an open field. But it was no ordinary field. The ground beneath me shimmered with the soft glint of starlight, tiny constellations blooming beneath every step. The sky above had gently inverted itself. Instead of stars dotting the heavens, they floated softly in the air around me, slowly drifting orbs of golden light, each one pulsing like a living thought. There were no walls. No shelves. And yet I knew, somehow, this was a library. It didn't hold books. It held stars. Each star, I sensed, was a story. I reached out to one gently glowing orb. It drifted toward my hand, hovering just above my palm. It pulsed once, warm and slow, and then unfolded like a flower made of memory. Within it, I saw a field I had once walked through, a summer afternoon, the feeling of tall grass brushing my legs. A breeze carried laughter from somewhere I couldn't see. I didn't remember the exact day, or who was there, but I remembered the feeling. That was enough. The star folded back into itself, gently, and rose again to rejoin the others. I wandered deeper into the field, moving slowly, each step echoing with a kind of hush. The stars made no sound, and yet their presence created something close to music, not notes, but understanding. A harmony of stillness. Some of the stars hovered low, close to the ground, showing scenes of quiet. A cat resting on a sunlit windowsill. Rain tracing lines down a glass pane. Someone setting a cup of tea on a wooden table with great care. Others drifted higher, showing memories not from any single life, but from something older. A fire crackling in a stone hearth. Lanterns rising into the night sky. A mountain path walked by countless feet, long before my own. At the center of the field stood a tree. It wasn't like the mirrored trees from earlier chapters. This one glowed faintly from within, its bark deep blue and filled with slow-moving stardust. Its branches reached up and out, each tipped with a floating orb, stars resting like fruit, waiting to be read. I approached. There was no ladder, yet as I drew near, one of the branches bowed low, offering its gift. I reached out. The star that drifted into my hands was cool at first, then warmed, humming softly. Inside, I saw myself, not as I was or had been, but as I might be. Sitting by a lake, older, quieter, the same lantern I'd once carried now resting beside me, its flame steady and calm. The me in the vision didn't speak. He didn't need to. His stillness said everything. I let the star rise again. It joined the others, and the tree seemed to sigh, not with sound, but with soft silver light that radiated outward, brushing against my skin like mist. I sat at the base of the tree. There was no need to go farther just yet. I wanted to stay in this moment, surrounded by drifting stories and starlight. Above me, a larger star descended, slower, more deliberate than the rest. It hovered just above my heart and then gently entered me, like a memory returning home. I closed my eyes. And for a long while, I simply breathed. When I opened them again, I was no longer in the field. The stars had begun to drift apart, clearing a path. And in the distance, I saw it, the last place on this journey. A mirrored lake, still and vast, holding the sky like a quiet secret. The final chapter waited there. Not as an end, but as a reflection of everything that had come before. Chapter 6, The Mirror Lake. The lake was waiting. A wide, endless surface that shimmered with the gentlest ripples, though there was no wind to stir it. It stretched to the edges of my sight, reflecting not just the sky above, but something deeper, an echo of stillness itself. The path led directly to its edge. There was no boat, no bridge. But I knew I was meant to cross. I stepped forward. And the lake held me. It was not water. It was light made soft, like the breath of a memory. My steps left no splash, only a quiet pulse that spread out in gentle circles, dissolving before they reached the horizon. As I walked, images bloomed on the surface around me. Not scenes. Not memories. But feelings. Calm mornings wrapped in blankets. The quiet warmth of someone sitting nearby without speaking. A hand brushing past leaves in a garden you barely remember visiting. All of it, familiar, and yet somehow new. The lake did not reflect me. It reflected how I had felt once. And how I still might. Above, the sky faded into a soft twilight. Stars, like those in the library, drifted down and hovered just above the lake, forming patterns I didn't try to name. I didn't need to. They weren't for knowing. They were for being. Somewhere in the distance, the chime of a single bell echoed. Not loud. Not near. Just enough to remind me that something gentle was waiting on the other side. I kept walking. The light around me began to thicken, not darker, but slower, like time moving through honey. Each step felt more like floating, and the lake welcomed me without a sound. Then, ahead, I saw it. A mirror, tall and freestanding, rising from the water. It looked just like the first one, the one in the attic, but here, it gleamed with a quiet invitation. No longer a threshold. Now, a companion. I approached. My reflection stood calmly, waiting. But it didn't mimic me. It looked into me. And in that moment, I understood, the journey had never been through the city. The city had always been within. The mirror flickered once, and my reflection smiled. Not wide. Not grand. Just enough to say, "You're here." And I was. Chapter 7, The Room of Gentle Echoes. I stepped through the mirror. But I didn't return to the attic. Not yet. On the other side was a room. It had no walls, at least, not in the usual sense. The space was held together by light. Soft panels of reflection floated like curtains in slow motion, rising and falling with the breath of stillness. The floor was a gentle mist, firm beneath my feet yet yielding, like walking on the memory of snow that had never been cold. It was quiet. Not silent. Quiet in the way a forest is when no one speaks. Quiet in the way a heart becomes when it no longer asks why. In the center of the room, there was a seat. It wasn't a chair, exactly. More like a gentle fold in the air itself, shaped perfectly to hold someone who needed only to rest, not to explain. I sat. And the echoes began. Not loud. Not voices. They came like gentle ripples through the space, tones and textures, each one soft as a whisper inside the soul. One echo sounded like the time I almost cried but didn't. Another like a breath I once held for too long. Others came like laughter shared in small corners of forgotten summers, or the hush that follows when you close a book that meant something. They didn't ask for attention. They simply arrived. And each one, I knew, belonged to me. Not because I had made them, but because I had lived them. The room didn't speak. It reflected, not who I was, or what I'd done, but how I had felt, across years and dreams and moments unspoken. Soft panels of light moved closer. One passed in front of me, and in it, I saw not my face, but a hand reaching out. Not to take, but to comfort. Another showed two figures walking beside a stream. Neither was me, but I knew the feeling of that silence between them. I let them pass. Let them be. I didn't need to name them, or claim them. Just watch. Just feel. And slowly, the room began to breathe with me. The light swayed in time with my thoughts. The air softened, until it felt like dusk had arrived, even though there was no sky here. In the distance, I saw a doorway begin to form. It wasn't sudden. It emerged like a memory returning, slowly, gently, fully. A frame of silver. A threshold of light. And beyond it, a shimmer of something both familiar and new. I stood. Not because I needed to leave, but because I was ready. The echoes followed me for a moment, then faded. Not disappearing, but settling into the quiet parts of me that I rarely visited. They would remain, I knew, waiting for me always. The doorway opened without a sound. I stepped through. And the light embraced me, not like an ending, but like a pause between pages. Ahead lay the final mirror. The first, and the last. Chapter 8, The Return Through the Mirror. There it was. The mirror. Tall and quiet, standing alone in a space that held no shape, only light and breath. I knew it immediately. Not because it looked the same, but because it felt the same. It was the one from the attic. And yet, it wasn't. This version shimmered like morning dew just before the sun fully rises. Its frame, once dust-covered, now gleamed with warmth, not polished, but lived in. The spiraling patterns I'd once thought decorative now pulsed gently, as if alive. I approached slowly. There was no rush. Every step forward felt like part of a goodbye I wasn't afraid to say. I glanced back once, but there was no need to linger. The city behind me, the garden, the corridor, the bells, the stars, they would remain, waiting. Not as places to revisit, but as parts of me now carried forward. I stood before the mirror. And it no longer reflected me. Instead, it showed a quiet room bathed in afternoon light. Wooden beams. Dust motes drifting lazily through the air. A window slightly ajar, letting in a breeze that stirred nothing but memory. It was the attic. Or maybe a version of it. I reached out. My fingers met the surface. It shimmered, not with coldness, but with understanding. And when I pressed gently, it gave way like water made of light. I stepped through. And for a moment, I felt myself dissolve, not vanish, not disappear, just blend, like a note folding into the end of a song. When I opened my eyes, I was back. The attic was quiet, still, and the mirror stood where it had always stood, calm and ordinary once more. But I was different. Not outwardly, but within, something had settled. A silence that didn't ask for attention. A calm that didn't need reason. I sat on the wooden floor beside the mirror. I looked at it, not searching for anything, just resting in its presence. It no longer shimmered with images or lights. But I knew they were there. Somewhere. Every now and then, I could almost feel the garden breathing, the bells humming, the stars drifting. Not as sights or sounds, but as reminders, that peace is not a place you go to. It's something you carry back. Outside the attic window, the light had shifted. Late afternoon, perhaps. Or something else. It didn't matter. I leaned back against a stack of old boxes, closed my eyes, and let the warmth settle. The mirror said nothing. But I felt it watching quietly. Just in case I ever needed to return.